Welcome to the Caribbean Property Investing Podcast, where we share real-life experiences for successful Caribbean property entrepreneurs. Learn about their successes, challenges, and strategies to help you create your plan for financial freedom. Now let's get started.
I love my community. It teaches you the importance of being together even through difficult times. Business owners doing their best to make it through. Fishermen and farmers working hard to put food on our tables. Nurses caring for the sick shows me who we are made of. People who care. I guess it's about growing together.
To ruminate, to create your ultimate living space. And at Courts, you'll find what you need. Choose from our wide range of furniture, electronics, and accessories to complete your space. We're here and ready to assist. Give us a call to place your order. Shop online at shopcourts.com or visit us in store. So ruminate at Courts, bringing value home.
We're back with another season, another year of the Caribbean Property Investing Podcast. We want to thank you for all of your support over the last 2 years. Actually, this is our third year. Admittedly, last year we didn't do as many as we would have liked, but this year we kicking off the year hot. We have a very, very special guest for you today, and I always say that all of my guests are valid, but this one, she's a lady who is a serial entrepreneur, philanthropist, just an all-around business professional with a very, very strong sense of adventure, highly organized, and these are all characteristics which you know I would like to have myself. And I always hear people say that when you interview, you actually learn from the interviewee. And it's so true. Every interview we've done, you know, we think that we actually ended up the interview leaving with more information and certainly more knowledge. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome you to episode 36, where we're going to speak to Miss Natalie John from all in the beautiful Twin Island. Is it a republic or country of
No,
Saint
Federation.
Federation, Saint Kitts Nevis. Welcome to the podcast, Natalie.
Thank you, Anselm, so very much for having me here. I hope you two had a beautiful Christmas, and I'm wishing you all the best for 2023.
I think the start that we have for the podcast that will be indicative of the kind of year we're going to have. So it's going to be a great year. We always like to start off the podcast by asking our valued guests to just tell our audience a little bit about themselves. So off you go. Who is Natalie John?
I normally say that Natalie John is an entrepreneur at heart. Persons might know me in the field of destination weddings or probably in the field of finance, having moved to St. Kitts to work with the central bank and then being the very first employee of the Eastern Caribbean Securities Exchange. But my true love is really entrepreneurship, and that spans businesses that I have created both here and in the Caribbean. It spans real estate in terms of investments that I have done again across the Caribbean. It spans to, philanthropy. I always think there's a need to be able to give back, and I try to do that, especially within the school system. So I try to do a lot with the Methodist Primary School, which was my very first school when I went into the education system. So there's a special love for that. And even here, where I'm based in St. Kitts, I also try to give back as much as possible. I think that's key.
Tell us, we always say, let's start at the beginning. Tell us about the decision or the opportunity to move to St. Kitts. What was that like?
Oh boy, you're taking me down memory lane. So, as a young adult, you came back from university. You have all these, sweet thoughts of what life is going to be like. And then on the personal side of things, Relationship wise, that didn't go well. And so I just felt I needed a new start. And so there was a friend of mine, a very good friend of mine at the time, saw an advertisement for the central bank for a position in the financial enterprise development unit, and said, maybe that's the break you need. You probably need to move away from home for a few years and then come back. And so I thought, okay, great. So I interviewed for that. I applied and then got an interview. I think it was in 1998, August of 1998. Didn't hear anything from the central bank, so I really thought, okay, that's it. I would be at the time I was working with government Ministry of Trade and Commerce, and I had really liked that. I had started with some other colleagues the buy local program in St. Lucia, and we had done exhibitions and so forth. Because again, I'm always an entrepreneur at heart. So Fruitsy Eldon Serrier was one of those that I started with and really assisted. But then come January 1999, I got the green light from the central bank. And I thought at the time it would have been a great opportunity for me, being my background, being in finance and marketing. And so I took that leap of faith, left home, came to St. Kitts, a much smaller island than St. Lucia. So it was really hard in the beginning, settling down. And I felt maybe 3 to 5 years max, and that's it. I'm coming back home. And so 23 years later, I'm still here. I'm still in St. Kitts.
Now you said something about when the opportunity was presented to you in 1999. Interestingly, that's also my time starting in telecoms. And ironically, I remembered you because I always wanted to work in Ministry of Commerce or Export St. Lucia. Whenever you did commerce, business, or marketing, for me, I wanted to work on a national scale, and I thought that was the real kind of ground zero, working with small fledgling businesses to help them. I didn't get the job, Ministry of Commerce. I think they said coming with a master's, they said you're not going to stay, you're going to leave. And I always thought in the Caribbean that's a really really poor principle to have, because it is a principle for some people. What they believe is that if they think that you're too qualified, whatever that means, I don't think you can ever be too qualified for a job. You actually passed up, and they take somebody who has a different set of qualifications. Because and I think that's always to the detriment of that business making that decision. I always believe give the person the opportunity to get in the job and see what they can do, and see they might actually love it and stay. So I didn't get a job. Then I got a job with telecoms company in 1999. So you also left in 1999. Your background in business and marketing, the first employer of the Caribbean Security Exchange. Tell us about that little journey there.
Okay, so and I always want to mention that I came from an entrepreneurial family. My dad was an entrepreneur in the southern part of the island. He had a business called Nat and Associates. They were furniture manufacturers. They were into real estate, selling prefab houses. My mom had Majon's boutique on Brazil Street. Was a famous boutique at the time, one of the first on the island. And then we had a restaurant, Majon's restaurant. And so from both sides of my siblings, I got the business acumen. And so moving to St. Kitts and coming to the central bank, in my view, was really, a bureaucratic organization. What it did teach me is the importance and value of structure. But being an entrepreneur, I didn't see my future in central banking at all. And so my unit got the opportunity to birth the stock exchange. And for me, that was a joy, because coming out of trade, I knew the amount of small businesses that needed that type of support. I think today, and that's another conversation, it has not done what it was supposed to do for entrepreneurs. However, though, at the time when the central bank, now we had birthed it, and the central bank was looking for employees, for me it was a no-brainer to say yes, I'm going across to do that transition because I truly believed in what the stock exchange was all about, not just from an entrepreneurial background, but also from a people development background. That if you believed in a company, say for example, say Fruitsy for Eldon, I think it was a great product idea. I still think so. I've lost touch with him for a while, but I think I see things on the shelf and so forth. But if you had like IPOs on our stock exchange, I think it would afford persons like Eldon and others so much more opportunity, persons within St. Lucia and around the Caribbean who are now able to say, yes, I know him, I can invest in him, and to be able to see that you could take something small, a startup, and through investment, because a lot of the time, banking is not necessarily the first place to go when you are starting up. You need that seed capital, you need that venture capital, you need that IPO from funds from others. And of course, you would then have institutions that the central bank had tried to birth that would then provide those support services. So, really, at the time, it was a dream, it was a vision by Sir Dwight and what he shared, and I believed in. And I felt, I would go in. And at the same time, I had started a small business doing weddings in 99, because again, when I moved to central bank, it was a very hard transition. So I essentially had started Central Bank and started Dreamy Weddings, my first company, almost at the same time. So when I left Central Bank and I went to the stock exchange by 2005, Dreamy Weddings was growing at a rate beyond just me and the staff I had in St. Lucia at the time. And so the decision was made, is it that I'm going to go and do it myself because I know where I wanted to go? Or do I stay, get that what we say good salary that you get in, six figures and so forth with all the benefits, or do you go and do it yourself? And again, the entrepreneur in me, it's never about that structure and okay, those six figures, because I think if you go out on your own, then you could make 7 and 8 figures. So
So here my
I
question
let
to you. So what made you decide to it wasn't a pivot, you just added on more responsibility and started exploring that entrepreneurial side. Why did you choose that sector, wedding and event management?
Okay, I always say it was divine intervention. That sector chose me because what I did know about entrepreneurship, I knew what I did not want. So I didn't want to go into the restaurant business because I saw my mom had no life. I had no life because she made me a part of it. So on holidays, you have breakfast, lunches, then you go home and take a nap, and then you back in for the evening dinners as well. And you can't tell the last patron to leave because you want to go home. You have to be courteous and wait until that last patron leaves. So I know I didn't want that life. For my dad, I really did not want a business where that went based on the cyclical nature of business up and down. So inflation, when things are rough, you still have your stock, you still have your bank loans to service and so forth, your overdrafts. So I knew what I did not want. I did not know at the time what I wanted. And so one of my first trips with Central Bank to Anguilla, after assignment, I was out on my balcony at the hotel, and then I saw a couple getting married on the sand in Anguilla, and that intrigued me. I had a sister who had a bridal store prior, but was more selling bridal accessories. And I think that actually is what maybe I think again I say divine intervention, because I think that's what God put into my path. And then that's the first thing I saw. And then a couple months after that incident, there's this gentleman who wrote me out of the UK saying to me that he found my name on a St. Lucia list, and he just chose me to ask some questions about renewing his vows, his 10-year anniversary in St. Lucia, and could I help? And at that time, I was really struggling with being a central banker, asking myself, did I make the right decision, to move to St. Kitts, move away with my family? And so I just said, yeah, sure. I answered everything he wanted. And then at the bottom of my email, I said, P.S., do you want me to put together a package for you? Right? I mean, I have no package. I'm working at Central Bank. There's no dreamy weddings, eh? And the gentleman wrote back thanking me and said, yes, great. Can I work on something together for him and his wife? And he said, Andrew Gould Foster at the time had done their wedding 10 years prior. So when I got on the phone with my mom and telling her that, and I said, Mom, it would be so good if we could get Mrs. Foster again at the time to do their renewal of vows as a surprise. And I got all into it. I was excited. I called my friend who's a taxi driver, Steven. I just used all my connections that I had in St. Lucia at the time because I am in St. Kitts. And every afternoon I come from work, I'm really excited to do this. The internet was, just starting off. .com was a newbie. Would go online to research wedding packages and see what's there. And then the gentleman came back, and this is happening over time, a couple of days. And the gentleman came back and he says, I am ready to book. I like what you presented. How do I go ahead and book your services? And I am like, holy cow, I have nothing, and then call back my mom. Long story. I was able to organize everything from St. Kitts. My mom executed it along with the other vendors. We did this at Pigeon Point, the public beach. When you look back at those pictures, you realize, ooh, but they loved it. They loved it. And the surprise was that my mom was able to get Mrs. Foster to do the renewal of our ceremony. So that was the icing on the cake for them. They were surprised by that. It had a lot of sentimental value. When I paid out everybody, I think I was left with something like, I think maybe I can't remember, it was 300 EC or 300 US that I had left back after I paid everybody, including my mom. And I thought at the time, okay, Natalie, that was easy and you made money out of that. So maybe that's the way to go. And then I went, got a friend who gave me a book, strikingitRich.com, to understand at the time the value of a .com business, because that was not the norm. You have to set up a physical location. And I read that book cover to cover, and that helped me, and did the research and so forth, and came up with my name, Dreamy Weddings, and the rest is history. 24 years later, still in the business, won Caribbean Wedding Planner of the Year, won lots of awards with A-list wedding planner with Dreamy. Just recently won another award for top 100 influential people. So I must say I've been blessed. I'm happy with what the Lord sent for me, because I have to say is what He sent for me, because I did not choose it. It chose me.
So weddings chose you, and how do you pivot or add on really? Because it's not a pivot, because you're not leaving anything. You're just piling it on. So tell me about the first real estate project, and what was it? How much can you share about it, and why did you decide to go into it? Other than what you told us about your dad, is it that you had some hereditary stuff? And how did you start off with that?
So if you consider in terms of a land purchase or a house purchase, which one you prefer?
They both property investing.
Okay, so I would probably say my dad tricked me. So my first purchase, I would say, was from my dad. So my dad sent me to university and I was super excited. I came back and I said, I have no student loans, so I'm really good. When I came back, my dad said, well, no, I spent too much money on you. And so here's a piece of land. Your mother has good connections. Go to the bank, get a loan, pay me back. And this is the piece of land. So, so,
No,
so really,
no, Natalie, I'm laughing because I'm still working on my active listening skills. And what happened to me a while ago is that I reverted back to my old uh, and predicting what the end of the sentence will be. I had no idea where it was going, so it caught me by surprise as well. So you had to cash out the land to pay him back his money.
yes. So
Okay,
yeah, so
okay.
what am I thinking? Really great. I could really start off fresh. And no, and people who know my dad, Nat was not an easy guy at all. And so I got, and I valued my dad. So yeah, I went to Fix at the time. Mr. Theophilus had just recently started Fix. Um, and he graced me with it, and he gave me a nice little lecture and so forth, and I appreciated that. Gave me the loan, took a chance on me. I had to pay my dad back that money, and so I've kept that property even today. I've not done anything with it as yet. It's a nice piece of land. It's in the south of the island. You get to see St. Vincent on a very clear day. So that was my first investment. And then when I moved
Natalie,
to St.
I want to stick up in there because we always have to we always get questions about kind of unfolding and unwrapping it. So what's happening here is that when you buy property, you can always use it. In fact, what your dad did for you is actually the reverse. Most parents actually have land from before. They take a loan. They take a loan on the land and use the land as security for the student loan. So the child comes back, and it could be either land or your parents' own home, that they actually mortgage. But instead, you went ahead. Now you got the land. You had to convert the land back to cash, and then you had that debt. But in fact, the land actually was an investment for the education.
Correct, because it's the same thing. So I had worked at development bank prior to going to university. So it was really easy. I knew all the procedures and so forth. And I had arranged for my dad to come in and have an interview because I wanted to go to school. And then he came back home and he said to me, "No, I'm not doing this. You must be crazy. So you gone up there, Natalie, and then you don't come back and my property in jeopardy? No, 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 no. You will have to give me good grades every semester, and I do not know if you could go back. You will determine whether or not you go back." Okay, so there was a joke on campus. I used to tell them, "Guys, well, I'm going home, but I don't know if I'm going to be back because if the grades are not good, that's it. I'm not coming back." I mean, thankfully, the grades are always good, so I got to come back and I got to finish. But when I got home,
Natalie, and the real value of that investment is the price that you would have gotten for it when you went for the valuation for the loan compared to the price that had paid for it. So that's the value of the land appreciation, and that's how you actually extract value from the property investment. Now, I have a similar story to you. And as I said, we learn so much in these interviews. I thought I was the only person. My mother told me that she's not paying school for me because I may turn Rasta and not come back. So I had to sign documents, but I was so naive. So I had to sign the documents. So the loan was in my name, but actually she was the guarantor. But all I saw was that I took a loan and I had to come back to pay for my loan because I would not, you know, would not jeopardize my mother's reputation or credit. But in fact, if I didn't really know then that actually she was a guarantor, and if I didn't come back, she'd have to pay for it. But you're right. But I got that thread as well. So it's actually interesting that he said that to you. You have to come back.
yes, yes, he did. So, so that was my first case in terms of real estate. And sometimes when you're young, you don't understand the value of what your parents are teaching you. And I always say, I mean, at the time, I didn't appreciate it because I thought, my parents were harsh. When everybody's going to summer fets and so forth, you have to choose because you have to go and work some days in Viewfort or weeks and then come back to Castries and work. I have a friend, Nicola, she always used to say, "Lord, Natalie, you closed the shop now." And I used to tell her, "No, no, no, I'm waiting for a little last minute sale somebody might have. But it's those little things that contributed to who I am today and who I'm continuing to become, because those things at a very early age you could understand what a P&L is, and the value of that, to be able to understand real estate and why it is important. And so many things at the time you don't know it, but I truly thank my parents because they were hard nosed, and you had to respect what it is that they wanted. So I've truly grown from that. So when I came to St. Kitts and St. Lucia in terms of cost of living was a shocker, because at home you could have rented at the time a house for maybe $500, and it's a nice place. Where I lived coming back from university, I think my rent was either 550 or 650, something like that. And when I moved to St. Kitts, I lived in somebody's apartment by their house, and I was paying like $1,100. And that's a one bedroom, really small apartment. So that was a shocker. And then again, the person that I was even though I had not built a home prior to leaving St. Lucia, I had already purchased all of my stuff. So I used to go by M&C every month and buy plates, buy cups, buy cutlery because I'm shopping for my home. So when I went to St. Kitts and realized that it's so expensive, I remember having that conversation with my parents and saying that, I don't think that I could continue paying somebody's mortgage. I might as well pay my own mortgage. And then St. Kitts had hosted Carrie Festa, but the government had not finished one side of the project. So afterwards, they called them low income houses. But at the time, the house was a 3 bedroom house on about 4,000 square feet of land, was about $110,000. That was back in 2001, right? And so I felt when I did the math, the repayment was about $1,200, which was $100 more than what I paid for my rent. So for me, it was easy, And when persons heard that I was venturing in that, area, everybody's like, "Oh, you're gonna stay in St. Kitts? You're not coming back to St. Lucia?" And I'm like, "No, this is an investment. One, central bank is here; it's not going anywhere. Two, anybody that's coming in would prefer to live in a house than an apartment." So these are the things that I thought of. Because if you had asked me, I would have preferred to own or rent a home rather than rent an apartment. And so for me, it was very easy. I had to get the down payment. And yes, I got the loan because I was not a national of St. Kitts. I had to pay an alien land holding license at the time, which increased the property cost by 10%. But even when I did the calculation of that, it was still better off for me to purchase than to continue renting. And a lot of times people always think of all the problems and, what ifs. But for me, I don't do that. I look, I assess, I evaluate, and if it is a good investment, I go through. When the problem then comes up down the road, whatever that problem will be, I will deal with it then. But I'm not going to sit down and think of, okay, maybe in a year or two I leave St. Kitts, what am I going to do with the house? No. If I did, I would deal with that at that time. And so, yeah, so that was the first property in terms of not just land, but a house that I purchased. Another thing I will say is that even if you have a home, a lot of times people want to go to one of the department stores and buy everything on hire purchase. I did not do that. I had traveled previously, and so I bought my fridge, stove, I think washing machine at the time. I bought those from the US and I shipped them because it was a bit it was less costly. And then I already had, I think, my bed. My dad had given me a bed when I moved to St. Kitts, so I had that. But the other little things, so my dresser and things of that nature, well, my dresser was a huge box. I put a big box, cardboard box, and then I had a nice cloth that I put over it. And for maybe about a year or two, that's what I had because, again, debt, I always learned from my parents. So my parents had very high highs and they had very low lows in business. So I understood that. And my dad always had a saying that when it's sunny, the banks give you an umbrella. But when it starts to rain, when you really need the umbrella to cover you, that's when they take the umbrella away from you. And so that guided me. So I always try to have little to no debt at all and do things in stages. So eventually I got to eventually furnish my whole house. Goats used to come into my yard because I didn't have a fence. Then when I did that, I did a fence eventually. So I did things step by step. And so I got a nice 3 bedroom home.
And Natalie, you said something which I say, the bank gives you an umbrella when it's sunny, and what that really means is when you have addressed all of their risks or all of their perceived risks, that's when they're willing to give you financing. But if you just starting off and it's iffy and things are still in the idea stage, or it could go south, you don't get that support. I can say, and I'm not just saying that I chose our sponsor because of my experience. I found out my experience with Bank of St. Lucia, that is different. And so I want to encourage you and all our listeners, the consultation is free. There are a number of units now, a number of programs that you can just call, check them, I think bankofstlucia.com, check them out, and you can at least have a conversation. And I can say with some measure of confidence that probably will not be your experience. Now, mind you, the bank is still a business. There are some fiduciary laws, debt management policies, and security and collateral you might still have to go through. But I can tell you, the longer the relationship you have with an institution, the lower the barriers, because they get to know you. And it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to be super successful. But once they understand what you're doing, they understand you as the risk taker and as the client, the relationship builds, and then there is a greater level of trust. So,
And that's true.
and
I would just say, I'll just say that is true, because I am actually looking at a new project in Saint Lucia, and I have actually approached Bank of Saint Lucia, and I must say the experience has been extremely good. So where banking has come from. So again, I'm speaking some 20 years prior, but the experience thus far has been really good with them. So yes.
they, yeah, they've come a long way, and I'm happy with the progress, the leadership. A lot has happened, and I think that they definitely are heading in the right direction. And banking is changing. I remember we had a guest last year, and he explained to me that what's happening in St. Lucia is people just buying mortgages off each other, but there aren't many new mortgages being created. So a bank will quicker give you, or some banks will quicker give you the money to buy off a mortgage than actually assess you individually, for a new startup. So what I'm hearing here, and we have to point this out, because Natalie, the feedback from some listeners and viewers always, early on, is that the people who can invest in property are always well off and stuff like that. I want listeners, you can rewind this when you're listening. She had a box for a dresser. She had goats coming in her front yard because there was no fence. And people she was probably working 2 or 3 jobs at the time as well. I want people to hear that, because what you see at the end, in most cases, almost inevitably, is not how it started. So now you have your home, and the saying, or the slogan that we use for the show is, everyone needs somewhere to live. You might as well own yours. You recognize from early that for $100 more, plus your Indian landholding license fees, you could actually own it and get capital appreciation on an asset, as opposed to paying rent. So Natalie, you like a Caribbean immigrant in New York. You have about 5 jobs: Central Bank, Dreamy Weddings. You just close on that house with no fence, no dresser. You may be sleeping on the floor. Actually, your dad gave you a bed, so you didn't have to sleep on the floor. But it was a hustle, and you were grinding. What led you now to the next property adventure? Were you just always still thinking of ways to be financially free, or were you thinking of financial freedom back then?
Oh yeah, I mean, I've always thought of financial freedom. Always. I mean, as I said, looking at my parents' businesses and seeing the failures that they had at some point, I didn't want that to happen to me. So I always think of that. My next project, I would tell you, is from a wedding perspective. So again, the wedding business now has started growing. I'm now not just in St. Lucia, but I'm in St. Lucia, I'm in Antigua, I'm in St. Kitts and Nevis, I'm in St. Martin now doing weddings. And everybody wants a beach or a sea view option. So that led me to wanting to get a piece of land. My thought at the time was I could, build a nice little cottage on it where I could have a sea view, so I could now offer weddings there. And of course, yes, I'm always inquisitive, asking. There was a new project starting off in the area where we are actually, where I'm at today. I got an opportunity I bought the land. Somebody had bought land there and came to tell me about it. I got a friend of mine to walk the land with me. So it was an architect because there was a spot I really liked. And then when the architect walked with me, he chose a different spot. And then he gave me the reasons why. And he pointed out things to me like saying, this spot right here, right in front of you, you will not have a neighbor because it's a green space. The space I had, he says, Natalie, the side adjoining into that, the Marriott owns it, and I've heard they wanted to do residences. So if they build residences there, it's gonna block your line of sight in the future. So things like that. As a newbie, somebody who just bought land and now you want something for investment, I was not thinking of those things. So I was very thankful to him giving me those gems, and so I decided to pick the lot that he told me to buy. So I purchased that piece of property, and then once I did that, my next plan was I needed to now get a plan for that property. And if you know me well, family is always at my core. So I always turn to family. So I have a brother-in-law who's an architect. Flew him up here to look at the property. I mean, at that time, I have no idea when I'm going to build it, but I'm still continuing on that same path. He came, he saw it. I said, okay, great. I want to do something. We did the topography and we realized that it was a very steep property. At the time, you didn't see it because it had trees and so forth on it. He designed it, got it approved, and got to build it. And so that's fast forward 2010, I believe. And again, I had a nephew who did construction and engineering at school, who had come back from the UK to St. Lucia. And everything fell in line for me because that was the time I think he was working with Destiny. And then Destiny, that was the medical school project in the South. That fell through. And then he was now thinking of moving to Dubai because he had gotten a job over there. And my mom said to me, Natalie, you know nothing about construction. You need to have a proper project manager and somebody who knows, get Naeem, he's not coming for free. You'd offer him the same rate of pay that he's having at home, but let him come and do that for you. Do not take it upon your own. Why? Because when I was doing my first house and I did the the fence, the guy who charged me to build the fence, I think he must have built about 3 fences on me, right? And it was only when my mom came, my mom says, but Natalie, no. And when my mom had a conversation with him, he's like, oh, so we had to fire him and we got somebody to finish my fence. So she says, Natalie, you don't want to go through this. Long story, spoke with Naeem and he says, great, he's going to come up. And so Naeem came up in 2010. We started that project. But the one thing I wanted to add here, this project I did not do in EC currency. I built with a US loan. And that's something else the banks do not tell you a lot of. If you could show that you have income in US currency, you can then get a mortgage or a loan in US currency. If you don't have any US currency, at least that was the case in St. Kitts, which when I did ask in St. Lucia, it was also there at that bank because it was a regional bank at the time. They don't promote it. You'll find maybe an expat coming home and they're able to loan money from the bank in US currency because they're getting paid in US dollars. The rate most times is like LIBOR +1 or +2 at the time. So the rate at the time was even much lower. So I was able to do this real estate venture from a US currency denominated loan. So my interest rate was much lower at the time.
A question for you. Why would you do it in US currency? What comes to mind for me is if there's any volatility in your currency, and we know that the Eastern Caribbean dollar has been fairly stable for the last 20, 25 years. And the facility of getting a loan in US currency, which was, are you saying, was it outside of the normal mortgage terms and conditions and a different rate? And why would that be the
Yes,
case?
it was a different rate. The rate was much lower in US currency than it was in EC currency. It was not on par. So that was the main reason I went for US denominated mortgage rather than an EC mortgage. And I was able, because of Dreamy Weddings, I had all my revenue came from US dollar. I didn't have EC dollar revenue from Dreamy Weddings. So I was able to gain on that. But again, that is not something that the banks publicize because, of course, their return is much less from a US dollar mortgage. Again, at the time, I don't know what exists now, but at the time, it was an advantage for me. And so I was able to prove that I did have the revenues to meet my mortgage payments in US dollar currency.
And outside of the cash inflows and the payments in US currency, were the conditions for the qualification of the mortgage any different to a typical mortgage, from your
No, it was the
understanding?
same. It was the same.
And the term, so the rate was lower, but the term could be as much as 25 years as well?
Correct. Yes.
Okay, fantastic. And with this, two things you said that really stood out for me is one, you constantly looking for advice and questioning and getting people to help you. And two, it just so happened that some of those people are actually in your extended family. A plug for Harold Nicholas. He was also my architect for our first home. Very very solid architect, and he's out of Saint Lucia. So what is the thinking for? So it's for. I remember you said it was it was a location that you could use to rent out as kind of like, I guess, forward integration in your existing business,
Correct. Yes.
the
So
wedding
so that
business.
was a Correct. So that was the thought process behind it. But what happened again when you start building, as you would well know, challenges come up. So by the time we cleared the land, we realized that what we got from a topo was incorrect. The land was much steeper. So while the drawing was for a three-story, because I always loved duplexes, that's something, traveling I saw I loved, so I wanted to incorporate that into here. So it was supposed to be a duplex and then a one bedroom underneath the duplex. By the time we started doing the construction, so one, the topo was wrong, and then by the time we did the so we did, no, I shouldn't say this. The topo was, he gave the topo, so the architect used that, the topography drawing, to go against his plan. But when we started now to physically build now, we realized the topo was incorrect. The land was much steeper. So Naim came to me and said, well, what are we gonna do? So I said, what are we gonna do? We're gonna take the extra, we're gonna take the extra that we get. Because as far as I'm concerned, if I could now get 4 units instead of the three, I'm taking that. So we nine is like, okay, great. But we didn't tell the architect anything. So we just assumed that we had 1, 2, 3. So all we did was increase an extra one, and that's it. Lo and behold, we didn't say anything to him. We built. And when we build now, no, you can't do that because it's a lot of engineering and so forth that goes with it. So now we have that
Correct.
extra unit that I didn't want to tell Harold. Naim was like, yes, you've got to tell him. And I said, no, you don't tell him anything. It's my project. I will handle it. Now, when we do it, we have no stairs to access that unit. So this is the time now. I'm calling Harold to say, boy, Uncle, we have a problem.
You do have a problem. Now, Natalie, that's not uncommon, because from my experience, a lot of the topography maps, unless they're updated, it might be historical, and so there might have been erosion and there might have been land movement, and so from my experience, every property I've developed or been involved in, it's always steeper than the topo. So what happens now? So
Yes.
because now you have issues of design, but you also have issues of engineering and of course budget So what happens next? What do you do then?
So the great thing is, I will say it and I say it all the time, Naeem John is excellent when it comes to construction management, because we built the extra floor, and for that building it's a double building. So we were supposed to have um, one, two, three, four units, but we ended up with 6 units because it's the same thing on the right side of the building is the same that's on the left side of the building. So it's one structure by a roof, but it's two separate buildings with a huge
Did you have to
stairway
go?
in the.
Did you have to go to increase your mortgage?
No, I didn't. I didn't. So what I said I'd do is work until we finish the mortgage, and if I need more money, that's when I would approach the bank for more money. So again, yeah, it's part of my risk taking, because I guess again the average person gets worried and say, what if? But I felt a bank cannot leave me stranded. That's how I thought. They can't leave me stranded because when I'm going from the ground up, so when I reach up and I can't cover my roof, what are you gonna do? You're gonna leave me with an unfinished home? So I took my chances, and but we worked within budget. We were able, because again I was of the mindset that that additional floor, even if I just had to just box it in, just create the structure and not go in with all the other things from the inside, I didn't mind doing that until again when I could, then I would then complete do the finishes and so forth inside. The beauty about that for us is that in St. Kitts, we were able to get duty free concessions because it came under the Condominium Act. And so we were able, that helped tremendously in terms of getting our things brought in from overseas. Again, because my project manager went ahead with me. So all my purchases overseas, I did not do that. I was really just the financier. He went, established a relationship with Home Depot, and we were able to bring in, ship our stuff in, clear it, and be able to do the finishing. So I say from those who are listening, ask questions. Don't do things alone. Somebody else has built, whether it be a friend of yours, always ask as much questions as possible. And building back then to building now with social media and so forth, so many people are now sharing that you ought not to go into a situation like this without having proper knowledge of what it is that you're going into. And so, yes, we ended up having another project. And then, in terms of just real estate, somebody maybe will call and say, okay, there's this property. I would assess it and see if it is a good property and if it's rentable. Because again, we have regional institutions here that persons are always looking to again rent a home rather than an apartment. So along the way, I've also picked up a couple of other properties to be able to offer as rental options.
So let me ask a question. I mean, typically when you go through some of the challenges of the build, you've pretty much had the biggest challenge of all, which is the actual structure and the financing. Also very privileged because your nephew is an engineer, and he was also your project manager as well. Most people do not have that privilege. But in the case of people who would not have that blessed kind of ecosystem, what advice you have for them in managing or managing a project like that?
So what I would say, Anselm, yes, I was very blessed to have family. However, though, it was a business. So I still paid him what the market rate was for having a project manager. So a lot of the times, persons don't want to invest in having a project manager because it's too expensive, but it is worth every single dollar if that is not your field. And so whether it be $5,000 or $7,000, you have to pay that person a month. I urge anybody listening, if you're taking on a huge project or even your first home, because contractors have a way of getting discounts, taking those discounts for themselves, and still adding markups on it for you, and you don't understand what is going on. Or sometimes they will take from one project to another. But if you have a project manager, they know all the tricks of the trade, and so they are there to watch out for you. And I will not do a project in real estate if I do not have a project manager. Um, if it is a built project, I have to have a project manager. So I want to do something in St. Lucia. Uh, I already have my project manager of who is going to oversee the project for me, because that is one value that you must have for building, because a lot of things come up that you're not aware. Plumbing, electrical, you have to go and buy something. A contractor who's unscrupulous will tell you he bought this wire, but he really bought it for another project, and your project didn't need that particular wire. But you don't know those things. He just brings you a bill and you say okay, you sign off on it. So the value of having a project manager, I would say it has to be number one on your list. It has to be factored into your overall mortgage.
And that's obviously independent of the contractor. I'm still thinking of the fact that it took your mother coming all the way from St. Lucia to let you realize that you got ripped off on your fence. But that's what
Yeah,
moms do, right? They can see things
correct,
in plain sight that you probably can't see because of a business experience as well. And
correct.
when you look at the different tracks that you have of ventures, two questions I have for you. One, do you think that it was an advantage to be out of your home country? And what is it about St. Kitts that you find that's different? How does that impact, your trajectory so far, especially in businesses? But tell me about real estate. I'm not putting you on the spot
Um,
here.
I will say what my mom has said. My mom believes that if I were in St. Lucia, um, I would not have been where I am today. That's something I can't say because I don't know the future. I don't know what it would have been. I do know I have an entrepreneurial spirit. However, what I can say to you is that St. Kitts is very different from St. Lucia. Um, for example, and even now, there are things that happen in St. Kitts that I speak to, friends of mine who are in government on both political sides, and I say, we should look at this, and these are the advantages of having this as opposed to that. And the responses I get is like, what? No, Natalie, government not supposed to do that for you. But what they don't understand is the value in that. So in St. Kitts, government does homes, and that started when the hurricane came and destroyed everything. And so they give you homes. So government has housing projects, low income. They call them low income because I guess it's government doing it. But they are good homes. I mean, my first home now, I could sell my first, if I wanted to sell my first home, I could sell my first home now for 5 times what I bought my first home, And so I think it's just a different approach to people development in St. Kitts. And I have truly grown to love and appreciate that in St. Kitts. And the support that you get, the local support that you get from a local wanting to do something. So you heard me say about duty free, right? And so you are allowed duty free concessions. It's not only for foreign investors coming in, but they also see local investors investing in the country as well. And so you have those advantages. Those things are in the law that you could certainly apply for. So the environment is very conducive. to allow locals or residents, because I only got my citizenship, I think, what, maybe maybe 9 years ago, somewhere about then, right? But even before that, being a Caribbean national, I was always embraced, being here in St. Kitts. And so, from a St. Lucia perspective, or not just St. Lucia, but I always think that we ought not to always want to make our own wheel. We should always look and see what others are doing and see if there's value in that, and take the value out of that and see how we could reinvest it in St. Lucia. Um, so I'll tell you that's how it has worked for me. And so maybe, yes, maybe I would not have reached that way, because I don't think at the time, because I've been out of home for such a long time, I don't think at the time we had those kinds of support systems in place for whether it be for local persons or young entrepreneurs at the time. And your second question, you did say,
I think you addressed it, and that is the difference. I guess in philosophies from being a non national and in your home country, and how you address those challenges.
I think that's a question we'll sit by a bar when I get home, and
And
I
that
could
and
be
that and
very
that's
candid.
fine.
I could be
So
very
Natalie,
candid.
one of the things I learned after having spent or invested a substantial amount of money over a period of 5 years or so into what I call a project of passion, is that you actually create your cash cow first, and then you go into your project of passion. I learned that the hard way. One of my friends, when I asked him, why is it that you know experience is always so expensive, Natalie? He says, you don't have to go for the expensive experience. You could take advice. It's free. But most people don't like to take advice. And I guess a lot of the times you hear it and you don't even know what it is. You just must be open minded. And I've learned that. And I'm saying that for those of our listeners who are thinking, well, she was able to do this because she had two businesses and two jobs. And we also address these listeners because the skeptic, will always, maybe be more vocal. Do you think that one of the reasons you were able to propel yourself was because, and even as you said, it found you that you had the income generators that you were able to fuel into the real estate ventures?
Okay, so let me just make something very clear. When I came back from university, right, I was broke, right? I was dead broke. You lived well at university because, like I told you, my father paid school for me. I did not know I had to come and get a loan. And so when you threw in that loan into the mix of things, and now having to pay a loan every month, that puts me in a bad financial position. So it was only when I went to central bank and I got my a salary increase, did I start getting into a better financial position. However, I always I always had that entrepreneurial spirit to see how I could have a second or a third income, right? So I think that's something that has to be said, because you're right. A lot of people see your finish or where you are, and they don't understand the journey that has taken you, where you are today. So I want to be clear on that.
Now we're going to my last question. We're going to end here. It's twofold. One, I want to understand, like, what's your philosophy for real estate. So for mine is replacing my income and just being financially independent. And so I own my time, and then I can pursue my projects of passion, my philanthropy. And that doesn't mean that only after you retire, guys, you must do good. You must do good even when you have very little, or even when you have work. But my philosophy is replace my income, have some insurance, have some cash, and then I can do all the things that I want to do, including further education, projects of passion, where there's a mentorship program. I would like Eastern Caribbean Central Bank to change a collective investing scheme option. I want us to be the agents who lead the bank to launch the first Caribbean OECS REIT, Real Estate Investment Trust. Right now, it's an exception. I think after talking to you, we'll let you make some calls for us. But we had meetings already. Our previous guest, Amanda Jabatis, excellent financial analyst. So that is, to me, that's the ultimate in terms of the outlook for real estate from where I sit. Making it free you up so you can do what you want and ultimately scale. So I want to know, like, what's your thinking for real estate, and what is real estate doing for you? What do you want real estate to do for you? One, and two, just anything you want to say to people listening to the podcast who haven't heard about you and hearing what you're saying. What's your view? Hearing what you're saying and thinking about real estate, what you have to say to them.
Okay, so philosophy, real estate in the beginning is not going to give you that sort of passive income. Over time, it will give you. So if you could put a certain amount of your investment in real estate, I would tell you yes, certainly do that. And why? Because, for example, back in 2001, when I did my first real estate property investment, now fast forward 23, 24 years later, the value is 5 times of that. So in my early 20s, my late 20s into my 30s, I'm not thinking of that. I just wanted to have that start. So you need to have a plan in terms of where you want to be. And especially if you have a family as well, that has to be taken into consideration in terms of your financial planning. For me, it always comes back to the entrepreneurial journey. And I think I have done, St. Kitts has been very kind, very good to me. And so, as a born and raised St. Lucian, I certainly want to be able to come back. So, my philosophy on real estate, I would certainly like to be able to come back home. And when I say come back, not necessarily to live home, but to actually have the investment in the I don't know where I'm gonna live as yet in terms of my latter, my however long, right? But I would like to be able to do a real estate project in Saint Lucia, and that's something I want to work on this new year. The other thing I would actually say to you, have various streams of income. If it is one thing COVID taught, for example, me as an entrepreneur, is that you cannot sit down and have one stream of income or all your streams of income coming from one source. So, for example, while my wedding business and my event planning business was on tourism, my real estate business was not only on tourism. So when that shut down due to COVID, I still had that passive income coming from my real estate investments. So planning your financial freedom, I say, make sure you have multiple streams of investment. Don't wait for retirement for those things of passion. Uh, Early in your stages, yeah, you come back from school, and you want to have that great job. But while you're having that great job and you want that success, you have to start putting monies aside very early for when those opportunities come. Because when opportunities come, what separates you is really having that cash that you could afford to take that risk on. And I say a risk because you might think buying the house, you just don't know what the future is going to hold. So it has to be money that you could afford to lose. So I always say that. And then as you get further into your financial planning and you now want to put your money into the stock exchange, right? So you may not necessarily physically be building, but say the stock exchange starts with REITs, right? So you now will be able to put your money and invest in a REIT. But again, it's an investment. Don't put all your life savings in it because you don't know what the future again is going to hold. Only put what you could afford to lose. And by when I say afford to lose, is that nobody wants to lose. But if in case you did lose it, you're not going to be that disadvantaged that you're starting all over again. Now with social media is out there and everybody wants to be that person and this person. You cannot do that at the expense of who you are. So, like I said early, my wardrobe was a cardboard box, but nobody's coming in my room, nobody's coming in my house, nobody knows that. You know, on on the outside, I have a nice painted home and so forth. So don't take leaps, don't jump, right? Take them step by step and learn from that. And the last thing I would say to your previous question, we have a society, especially in the Caribbean, where we don't ask questions because we don't want the person to feel like, we did not know and so forth. So, one of the things that I have actually done is to form an organization within the weddings industry called CWEP, Caribbean Weddings and Events Professionals, to really highlight us in that industry, to showcase what we can do. But more importantly for me is to be able to literally help and train. Why? And people say, why are you going to do this? Because I can afford to do it now. And when I say afford, not necessarily finance, but you have to be able to reach a stage in your career where you are not threatened anymore, that you want to see other people like you, right? And there's nobody else like me from a wedding perspective. I operate in 13 different Caribbean destinations. Why aren't there others? Why must it be only an international company who's gonna do something like that? And so there's still some people who kind of skeptical, like, oh well, why does she want to tell you what's in it for her and so forth? There's literally nothing in it for me. Why? Because been in the industry for 24 years, what other award do I want to win or so forth? But I want other people to be able to win those awards, because at the end of the day, I'm always a Caribbean person at heart. The Caribbean dollar, the EC dollar, supports a chain of islands. So if I do good in Antigua, somebody else does good in St. Lucia and Dominica, it means we all do good. But if one island is not doing well, then it can ultimately bring down the value of our EC dollar and so forth. So things that, from again an investment perspective, that we don't always consider. I think having the benefit of having worked in a central bank, in a stock exchange, understanding business gives me a much broader perspective. And truly, I am always a Caribbean person. I always tell you, I ended up in St. Lucia because that's where my parents were. I am not xenophobic, so I'm not somebody who feels, well, I don't want somebody else to come into St. Lucia, or vice versa. So many of our family members went to the UK, and create a better life and so forth in the US and so forth. So for me right now, Anselm, it's really about what can I do to assist. I was happy to come on to be able to share, to let others know that yes, you may see me today, but it has been a journey. And while we speak only of real estate, there's so much more other things that I have done to be able to help me to come to that path. So, I want to say congrats on that podcast. You an inspiration, because in the wedding business too, I want to start. I have not been able to find the time to start, but I want to congratulate you on doing this, and just sharing with others, so that we could inspire, we could get somebody else to say, yes, I can do this too.
Thank you. Our objectives are the same. Congratulations on CWEP. I've been what do you call trolling. So I've been trolling you for some time. Just seeing the emergence of the event management fraternity, and how COVID actually, made them even more visible. And I think you need to, and I'm going to give you your flowers again, because you've been recognized internationally already. I really like it. I enjoy some of the episodes that you've had, the webinars. Even I think one of my favorite interviews you did was the one, I think, with the Trini photographer, the young guy. I think it's
Yes,
Trinidad,
yes,
yeah.
Shem. Yes,
Yeah,
Shem
and
of
it
Louvo.
was amazing. And exactly what he was meant to do. So after I saw the webinar, I went to look at his page. I went to look for him on Instagram, and the photos I saw there were absolutely mind-boggling. And what he said was, we can do this in the Caribbean as well. He said that, and that stood out, from the webinar. So Natalie, I want to thank you again. As I've said before, whenever we do this, I am the one living here with more knowledge than actually we think that we're giving. We're hoping that when people see the podcast, they check other back episodes, but also just like you, they feel inspired to do more, to share more and to give more, because they're saying a rising tide lifts all ships. And I think like this is the time for Caribbean entrepreneurs. I think that the startup culture, startup is no longer a fad. It's a global trend, and we of course last on the trend wave, but we're getting there. Some countries already have incubators, and so for me, my passion for property and what it can do to you to give you the financial freedom is not the financial freedom for you to sit down, have a cigar in your pool, and cross your legs and call a butler. It's not for that. It's to see how we can help more people, come out of poverty, push themselves a little more to get a better life for their families, for their friends, for their communities, and most importantly, share that so we all are lifted. You've been listening to listen and watching another episode of the Caribbean Property Investing Podcast with our guest, Ms. Natalie John, awesome, inspiring Caribbean woman. I feel very, very proud. Even if St. Kitts rents her, she's owned by St. Lucian. And if she argues with me, I'll just call her mother for her. Remember, if you like the podcast, subscribe to it, share it. Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, on all major platforms. You can reach us at Caribbean Property Investing gmail.com, or just check our domain directly. Until next time, remember what we always say: somewhere to live. Like Natalie, you can also own yours.
I love my community. It teaches you the importance of being together even through difficult times. Business owners doing their best to make it through. Fishermen and farmers working hard to put food on our tables. Nurses caring for the sick shows me who we are made of. People who care. I guess it's about growing together.
To ruminate, to create your ultimate living space. And at Courts, you'll find what you need. Choose from our wide range of furniture, electronics, and accessories to complete your space. We're here and ready to assist. Give us a call to place your order. Shop online at shopcourts.com or visit us in store. So ruminate at Courts, bringing value home.
Congratulations and thank you for tuning in to the Caribbean's first property investing podcast. We want to help Caribbean people create wealth and achieve financial freedom through property investing. Our show provides general advice based on personal experiences and is for educational purposes only. For more information, resources, and past episodes, visit us at CaribbeanPropertyInvesting.com. Remember to click the subscribe button so you never miss a show. Let's go.